Hello, guys. This is Jack, and today we're going to be talking about my favorite films of 2025 so far. On my list, I have about 33 films that I will be talking about briefly, and as I continue to go down the list, I will go deeper and deeper into the films that I really enjoyed this year. I think 2025 has been kind of slacking a little bit from the beginning of like January, February, March, and April. But after those months happened, we kind of started to get like some really good stuff in between, those months. But I'm going to go, into some of the movies that I really enjoyed. But without further ado, let's get into it. So starting at number 33, I have Hurry Up Tomorrow, which is a very controversial film on my list because I'm kind of like one of the few people who really enjoyed this film. And this is coming from somebody who really enjoys Trey Edward Schultz films. I already talked about this film on my channel, so if you want to like check the video out to kind of like hear more of my thoughts about it, you can do that. At number 32, I have Baby Invasion by Harmony Korine, which is the new Edgelord movie from Harmony Korine. And this time around, Harmony Korine is shooting a movie in first person and with AI, and most of the AI is just baby masks and a lot of guns. And Burial does the soundtrack for the film, and I really enjoyed it. And it was one of those movies that really tapped into the idea of brain rot in media, so I don't really have to go super deep into that film. And then I have the documentary Pee-wee's as himself, documentary about Pee-wee. Don't need to go super deep into that. Then there's Still Tomorrow, which is a Italian film that I really enjoyed. It was about this woman who is in Rome, and she's a working class woman, and she's going through a lot of stuff that's happening with her family. I really vibed with the black and white color cinematography in some moments of the film. And I think this was like Italy's pick for the Oscars last year, if I remember correctly, but I liked it. Then there was Sujo, which was Mexico's pick for the Oscars last year. This was just kind of like a quiet, meditative film about the cartel and mostly about the immigrants in the country as they're trying to like escape out of Mexico. And I thought this was really intense. And then also at number 28, I have The Surfer, which is a Nick Cage movie set in Australia about a surfer who comes home to Australia to buy his family's home, only to be, taken aback by a couple goons who storm the beach and take over the beach. And it's a whole conflict where Nicolas Cage's character has to kind of like fight off these goons while also dealing with like toxic masculinity. And I thought this movie was like hilarious. There's a lot of like psychedelic moments in the film, and Nicolas Cage is like at the top of his game in the movie. And then at number 27, I have a movie that was premiered at Sundance, and that is Omaha. This film was, I think, one of the most gut-wrenching films that I've seen this year, and it's basically kind of based on a true story. It has John Magaro, and I already talked about this film on my channel. I won't go super deep into it, but this is one that you should be checking out, and you should be looking an eye out when it comes out officially this year. Another Sundance film that I did watch is Twinless, which is another film that I reviewed on this channel, which stars Dylan O'Brien and James Sweeney, about two twins who lose twins and they become best friends out of it. And it was really surprising, very emotional, a lot of like comedic moments. And it's one of Dylan O'Brien's like best performances that I've seen from him. And then at number 25, most recently, I did watch the Pavements documentary about the 90s slacker band, Pavements. And this is kind of like a meta documentary where you're following the band and their biography of their life and journey as a band. But also at the same time, you're following threads of the band creating a musical, an art installation, and a biopic about themselves by actors that like Joe Carey from Stranger Things. And this one was really, really interesting, very emotional for me because I really love Pavements as a band. And it just goes through a lot of like the quirks and like the feelings of their music and their whole life. And then number 24, I have The Life of Chuck, which I also reviewed on this channel. Don't need to go super deep into it, but I really enjoyed this. This is Mike Flanagan's best film that I've seen from him, and it's kind of like a deviation from his typical horror stuff, as this is more of like a family drama about a boy who grows up and is trying to like figure out his life while also slowly dying from a disease, and he tries to find the ways of living and just happiness. And this was really, really cool. And then at number 23, I have Nisha 2, which is a Chinese animated film that broke a lot of box office records. It got I think $2 billion worldwide, if I remember correctly. And I saw this out of the whim because of the press behind the box office records. And this was just a fucking wild ride. It's like Dragon Ball Z meets My Hero Academia meets Demon Slayer. Just a lot of crazy animation and fist fighting and just a lot of crazy vibes. And if you don't know anything about this animated film, I highly recommend checking out the first film, which is on YouTube for free right now. And then at number 22, I have a documentary from one of my mutuals on Letterboxd, Heather Landsman, who directed a documentary about Bjork and the Bjork Killer. And if you don't know anything about the Bjork Killer, it was kind of like a weird, crazy story about like this guy who was obsessed with Bjork and documented his kind of like suicide video of him, confessing his love for Bjork and then killing himself on tape. And this documentary is basically just a raw retelling of the matter at hand. And I personally really enjoyed it. I already have seen documentaries about like the subject, but I think reliving it was kind of like a sad tale to kind of experience. And then coming at number 21 is The Encampments, which is a documentary about the Palestinian protests that happened in Columbia University back in 2024. I recently watched this and I was really riveted by the subject and just the entire presentation of the documentary. And it's mostly stuff that I already know about, but just to kind of like bring it back into my mind about some of the stuff that happened around this time really kind of shook me and really kind of made me focus more about like the idea of protesting in America right now. I will not kind of like go super deep into that, but this documentary was very riveting, emotional, and if you want to watch a documentary that's really, really damn good, The Encampments is probably the one that you should be watching and you should be seeing this year. Another documentary that I really enjoyed is Grand Theft Hamlet at number 20, which is a documentary about a group of actors who try to like retell Hamlet inside of a GTA server. And this was like filmed during the pandemic, and it's mostly these actors trying to like redo the play in the server, but also at the same time they hire a bunch of players that are like in the server to perform some of the key moments in Hamlet's play by Shakespeare. And I really enjoyed it, and there's a lot of scenes where you kind of know a little bit more about the actors as they're like talking through some of their struggles as the pandemic is trying to like wallow them inside. But yeah, this was really good. I really enjoyed it. And then at number 19, I have Friendship, which stars Tim Robinson. And this is a like kind of dark comedy about a guy who is about to move out of his neighborhood until he finds a new neighbor who is a weatherman played by Paul Rudd, and they become best friends. And it starts off pretty lovely. And then somehow something bad happens and it causes a rift between Tim Robinson's character and Paul Rudd's character. And it gets really strange. It turns a little bit into like Uncut Gems with like the cringe humor. But this was just hilarious, and I was gagging and like laughing the whole time. There's also a moment where one of my favorite character actors just appears out of nowhere, Connor O'Malley, and he just talks about Afghanistan and like how we should have never left. But yeah, this is just a really funny, crazy movie that will definitely be like on my list of like favorite comedies that I've seen in the past few years. At number 18, I have April, which is a film about a nurse who is going through a lot of her procedures in this like small Georgian town. And the film is very slow. It's a slow burn movie where you're following this nurse, and the first like 30 to 45 minutes is just a lot of still shots of characters going in and out of frame, characters just performing really long and intense procedures on women. Raw. There's a lot of unfiltered nudity in the film, and I was like really riveted by it, and it really kind of like put me into a spot of whether or not I should be thinking more about like women's health and like how we should go about with women's health, especially now. But yeah, this was kind of like a very trippy vibe movie. I've never seen the director's other films, but I want to like check them out because this one was kind of like one of those films that really like washed me over while I was watching it in theaters. And then number 17 and number 16 are two films that are directed by the same directors that are two different genres, but are also coming from the director's own wheelhouse. And at number 17, I have Black Bag, and number 16, I have Presence. Black Bag is a throwback crime thriller about these two spies who are trying to like figure out who the mole is, and Michael Fassbender and Cate Blanchett are two of the spies, and it was just a really joyful film. It's very fast-paced. There's a lot of scenes where it just breezes on by, and it ends in a really cool spot. And then Presence is a kind of like a stripped-back haunted house film about a family that's getting haunted by some entity in their house, but it is shot in the first-person point of view of the ghost. And I really vibed with this film. There's a lot of cool visual moments that really put you on the spot. And Julia Fox and Lucy Liu put on some really good performances. I highly recommend it, and I think it's one of the better horror films that have come out this year. And then I also have When the Light Breaks, which is a small indie film about a group of teenagers who are going through some troubling times. One of them loses a friend during a bridge collapse, and that causes the friendship to kind of fall apart in real time as the film kind of focuses their day as, you know, the friend dies and they're all kind of trying to like live their life or live their day without their friend. And this was kind of like a really quiet and meditative film that really washes you over. And it's only short. It's only like 80 minutes, but I really enjoyed it. And it's one of those films that I will try to like continue to like look for or kind of think of throughout the year as the year ends. Number 14, To a Land Unknown, is a Palestinian film about two cousins who are trying to like get out of Athens, and they try to like scheme their way out. And it's kind of like an Ocean 11 situation where they start to kind of figure out a kind of heist plan for themselves to get out of the country. And a white woman is in the middle of the mix, and a refugee child is also in the middle of the mix. And it really questions a lot of the morals of immigration and just fleeing away from a country that is not yours. And the main actor in this, I've also seen another film of his this year, which I thought was kind of like okay, but here, his performance in this film is really, really riveting. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. And then getting, closer to my list, number 13, I have Mission Impossible Final Reckoning. I talked about this film on my channel. Don't need to go super deep into it. I understand the first hour of this film is just filled with exposition and just people talking about the entity. But I think after the submarine sequence happens, the film goes way up. And it ends in a very satisfying, very cathartic way. And then at number 12, I have David Cronenberg's new film, The Shrouds, which is a sci-fi drama about a funeral director who has technology where you can kind of excavate people's bones and skin, and just you can see the actual corpse inside of the grave. And it's very like technological. It plays a lot with the ethics of a funeral culture, and just also in general, it's a very hilarious film. It plays a lot with satire on like businessmen. And Vincent Cassel puts on a really good performance, and Diane Kruger as well. But Guy Pearce plays kind of like the nerdy tech guy who appears in the middle of the movie and is trying to figure out what happens to the overall kind of emotions of the main character, and just also in general the ethics of funeral directing. But that's a kind of like a hard explanation of this film. What the film really is kind of like a love letter of just everything that David Cronenberg has been doing for the past couple of years, and just like his entire career. As I feel like this is probably his last film. He's been talking about kind of like retiring, but I highly doubt that. It does get like a little bit more complicated as the film progresses, and yeah, like it's a really funny movie. You can tell once you see the movie, it's very kind of in its own world, I should say. And then number 11, I have Suleiman's Story, which is a French film, a film about a refugee who is trying to live their life as an Uber driver, food delivery driver, I should say. And there's a lot of crazy stuff that's happening in between his deliveries. And he's trying to like get his papers in order, in check, and he's also trying to like find a place to sleep before the night ends. And it's a whole kind of a day in the life of a refugee film. And even though I've seen these types of films before, what Suleiman's Story does is it doesn't shy away from like the harshness of the overall experience. It doesn't sugarcoat a lot of the experiences. It just shows it like straightforward. And that alone, to me, really puts the movie at a higher level compared to like some other films, some other social realist films that I've seen over the years. But yeah, this was really solid. And then we get to number 10, which is Sorry Baby, which is a film that I saw at Sundance back in January. I already talked about this film on my channel. You can go ahead and check out the video there. But I will say this, I've been thinking about this film. It's about a girl who is going through some troubles, and she was abused by her partner, and she's trying to like wash away the pain of the abuse. But she can't figure out how to, go through it or grieve around it. And I thought this film was very human. There's a lot of like sense of like humor with its like subject matter, which was very surprising. I've never seen like any of like Eva Victor's works on YouTube or just like in general, but her debut was just very stunning and really moving. And I'm glad Lucas Hedges is back, like my boy is back. I haven't seen that guy in years, and I'm just like happy that he's back on the big screen. Number 9 is another film that I already talked about, and that is The Materialists. I talked about this on my channel. Don't need to go super deep on it. I think it's one of the best films of the year so far. All 3 of the actors put on like their best performances that I've seen so far in their careers, and it's just a good time. And then at number 8, I have Vulcanizadora. Excuse me for my pronunciation, but this title is really whack as fuck. But I saw this last week, and it's one of those films that I can't really recommend because it's a very stressful movie about 2 friends who go on a trip in the forest, and it turns out they're going through some shit, and they reveal one thing from another from both perspectives, and it turns into a nightmare scenario. I've seen the director's film before. I really enjoyed Relaxer, the last film, or the film before Vulcanizadora, and I've seen these 2 actors before. I think they've played kind of different roles in the director's films, but this one was it was riveting. It reminded me of Gerard Carmichael's debut, which also has themes of guilt and doubt and just stuff that happens in this movie. Also happens in the Gerard Carmichael debut, so I'm not going to go super deep into it. This is one where I will only recommend it for weirdos and just people who really enjoy kind of cringy movies, and this one takes the cake. And then at number 7 is another film that I already talked about on this channel, and I will ride or die for this film, and that is Better Man, the biopic, the wild, crazy biopic about Robbie Williams as a chimp. Don't need to go super deep into this, but this was riveting, and it put me in a spot where I was just like, this is what musicals should do, or musical biopics should do. They should be audacious, they should be loud, they should be fucking crazy, they should be experimental, and Better Man is just all of that. And then at number 6, I have Bring Her Back, which is directed by the Philippou brothers, YouTubers turned directors. Their debut, Talk to Me, was a fantastic horror film. And this is another horror film from the Philippou brothers, but this time around, it's more gnarly, it's more meaner than Talk to Me, and it's about 2 kids who get adopted by a single mother who also has a kid, and some weird stuff happens, and it is a film about grief, it is a film about motherly love, And it is a film about facing your fears and just stuff that happens in typical horror films. But the way the Philippou brothers shoots this film, it is told in a way where it feels very like lived in, and it feels very raw compared to like other, horror films where they'll just do the typical jump scares and just like manipulation tactics to kind of bring the audience into a spot where they don't really think for themselves. But here, you're thinking a lot. You're thinking a lot about the overall motivations of all the characters, especially the mother, who is played by Sally Hawkins in the film. I think she puts on a really great performance, one of the best performances of the year so far. And it's very lived in with its like influences of like Japanese horror and like French extremity. And yeah, like I will continue to be vibing with the Philippou brothers because they always put on like a great show, even if you're not like a big fan of their work. But this one was really fucking great. And then at number 5, I have a film that is very controversial on film Twitter and Letterboxd, but I'm putting it here because I was thrilled and riveted. This is basically the word of the day, but Warfare by Alex Garland is the follow-up to Civil War last year. Instead of this being kind of a narrative film, this is more of an experience where you're following a bunch of soldiers as they're going through a mission in Iraq, and it is told in a third person perspective, and it doesn't break away from any other place. You're just following these soldiers in and out of their mission, and it was very intense. One of the best sound design that you'll hear this year, and one of the best performances by a lot of the young actors in this film, especially DeFaro Wunetai, who has a lot of great moments in this film, and Will Poulter as well, and Kit O'Connor, and even Charles Melton, who disappears halfway through the film and just disappears. But Charles Melton, I'm glad he's back. I'm glad he's doing bigger things, and he's staying away from like Riverdale. But yeah, Warfare, fantastic movie, one of the best thrilling movies that you'll see this year. Number 4 is another film that I already talked about on this channel, Mickey 17, the new Bong Joon-ho joint. I smoked the bong for this, and this was just a really great sci-fi film with Robert Pattinson playing 2 Mickeys, 3 Mickeys, 4 Mickeys, 17 Mickeys. But yeah, this was really great. I don't really need to talk about it, but it's another film where it plays a lot with like science fiction ethics and cloning and the whole idea of cloning. And also on top of that, environmentalism. Usually stuff that Bong Joon-ho always plays around with his films, like Snowpiercer and Okja did the same thing. But this was more of Bong Joon-ho's wheelhouse in terms of just like comedy and just the overall camaraderie between his actors. But I really enjoyed this one. And then when we get to the top 3, the top 3 films of the year so far are just films that one, I've talked about, and 2, another one that I haven't talked about on this channel, but I'm going to talk about. Number 3, I have The Phoenician Scheme. I already reviewed this film. I think this is one of Wes's better films that has come out over the past couple of years. I think it's better than Isle of Dogs. I think it's way better than Asteroid City and The French Dispatch. This one was like very emotional, and it's more self-contained compared to his other recent films. But again, Benicio del Toro is really great in this. Michael Cera puts on a really good performance, and I think this film really hits home with its themes of political come-ups, and just the idea of having somebody who was taken as a villain is eventually taken now as a hero of his own story. And then at number 2, I have a Japanese film called Happy End, which is about a group of teenagers who want to become musicians in their small town, but at the same time, they're going through a lot of emotions as their school is kind of entirely surveillanced by a bunch of surveillance cameras and technology. And each and every move of these teenagers' school life is surveillanced by the admins in the school. And every time they do something bad, they get docked off with their credits, their social credits. and this causes a rift between the admins and the students, and it basically turns into a protest where the students form a sit-in inside of the school, and it's a whole moment where these students will not go out of the school until they have their demands met. And this is one of those films that really touched me and really moved me, because it's again playing again with protest vibes, but also at the same time you're following these characters and they're really like living their lives and trying to like tell their story and try to like tell more about like their lives, and also give a lot of the emotions of like what they're feeling currently with the way they're living. There's multiple earthquakes that are like going around the Japanese city. They're constantly being surveillanced. They don't understand what's going on with their like school and like their bonds and with their friends. And yeah, this just really moved me, and two of the performances in this film really moved me. I will not pronounce their names because I don't want to like get scammed out of Japan, but yeah, this was like really entertaining, really emotional, and just overall one of the most unique sci-fi films that I've seen this year. And then at number one is a film that I've talked about this film ad nauseum on my channel. I don't need to like go super deep into it because I already reviewed it. I already explained my feelings around this film, and of course, it's Sinners. It's Sinners. It's one of those films that continues to question my faith in filmmaking as I continue to watch more films this year. Sinners is the one that hasn't like fallen down on my list. It just has been staying there at number one, and it's just one of the most original, extravagant films that you'll see this year. Ryan Coogler is just at like his peak with this film, and Michael B. Jordan is at his peak, and just like the whole cast is at its peak. But yeah, that's like my best films of 2025 so far. I hope you guys enjoy this little impromptu rundown of my list of favorite films so far this year. I hope you guys watch a lot of good movies, and I hope you guys take a lot of my recommendations. If you didn't like my recommendations, that's fine. Put your list down below in the comments. As you know, this is just very subjective, just mostly my type of vibes. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. There's going to be more reviews coming out on this channel, so stick around for that. Take care. Peace out. Bye-bye.